So this is the sexual market value chart, and it shows both men and women's sexual market value relative to their age over time. Now, I think there are big problems with this chart, so I don't think it fully represents reality. Now, I realise that's quite a big claim, so I'm going to go through step by step, in order, all of the things and the problems that we have with this sexual market value chart. So let's get started. And the first thing I want to draw your attention to on this chart is the steep decline in male SMV after the age of 36. So if you compare the man and the woman's SMV, you can see the woman's declines rapidly once she reaches a relatively young age, and I kind of agree with that. But for men declining this precipitously and this rapidly after age 36, I don't agree with that. So let's go through, just talk through generally some of the advantages of being an older man. Now, given that these advantages hold true, we wouldn't see such a steep decline in SMV after age 36. In fact, we might even see it level out and in some rare cases possibly even continue to go up. So let's have a look at them. Advantages of being an older man. So obviously you're going to lose your ability to have erections 7 times a day as you get older, and to some degree you will lose the desire for constant sex. But is that necessarily a disadvantage, and is that necessarily a decline in SMV? I would argue not. Now, think about what happens when you get older. You can start to control your emotions much better. You have tighter emotional control. You tend to focus more on the things that are important, and you start to lose interest in things that you cannot control. So think about how that translates to what you're like on an hour by hour, minute by minute and day by day basis when you spend time with a woman. A guy that's more in control of himself is to a degree, I guess you could say, more alpha, you know. He's not being flapped around and blown around by the winds of circumstance and the winds of change. He's more like a rock in control of himself, so she feels safer to be around him because he's got more control of his emotions, and it's more of an attractive quality as opposed to a younger man that's more likely to be panicking and going up and down with whatever's happening in his life. Now, the second factor is, as you get older, you start to care less about sex. Now, whilst this might be a slight disadvantage, I guess, for some females that are nymphomaniacs, actually not many are, and I've found in my situation at least, and I'm sure other men find the same, is that women tend to follow your patterns with how often you want to have sex. And if you don't want to have it every day or 3 times a day, then they kind of fall into that, and it's not such a big deal if you're in a relationship too. So I don't agree. It hasn't been stipulated on the SMV chart that this is a factor, but it's not a factor, I don't think, that if you lose interest in sex and you don't want it 3 times a day, that this is going to contribute to your decline in SMV. Now, also in losing interest in sex, you have 2 dual benefits of this. One of those, and a big one, is that a woman cannot control you or manipulate you as easily, and this is a huge one. Now, a big part of that is mindset too, but if the woman doesn't hold the hold over you the degree to which she did when you were younger, in that she's the gatekeeper to sex, and you actually don't care all that much about sex all the time, then she has less control and manipulation over you, so you're more difficult to lead around by the nose, so to speak. This is an attractive quality. If you can't be manipulated and you're more like a rock, and as I've said, you've got more emotional control, this is a benefit of being older, and therefore your SMV doesn't decline steeply as you get to past age 36. And also, aging doesn't have to be a physical death knell. Now, as I've said, the author Rollo Tomassi has stated and equivocated the graph, and to say that if you're not declining physically that much, then yes, it's not so much of an issue. I do have a related video. I'll talk about it at the end. It's the next in the sexual market value series, and it's a big long video, 22 minutes long, and I go through everything that I've done to preserve my looks level, if you like, and I'm now age 43. Hasn't particularly declined since I was age 20, and there are lots of things you can do. So again, this is going to contribute to keeping your SMV relatively stable after age 36, or at least not declining precipitously as demonstrated in the graph. Now, I'd also like to introduce the concept of growing into your power as you get older too. Now, these are concepts that I talk through in Primal Seduction, but there are lots of mindset qualities that older men can get if they grow into their power as they age, which means that they actually, I would argue, even to a degree, increase their SMV as they get older. Not decline, at least hold steady, but certainly not decline like as shown in the graph. So some of these qualities that denote growing into your power as you get older include growing a sense of entitlement, so entitlement towards women. This is huge. If you can walk up to a girl and at a base level you actually feel worthy of her, so you've got plenty of reference experiences, so that you've had girls of this quality before, so you've got the reference experiences, it contributes towards a sense of entitlement to the girl. You feel entitled to this quality of girl, so that sub-communicates out and radiates out from you when you talk to her. And these are qualities that men tend to get as they get older, all the way past 36 too. Mindset is a big part of how you appeal to women. It's not just about how many wrinkles you've got on your face, and again I'll go through this in my other related video in this series. It's not just about that. Mindset is a big part of your SMV too, and these are things that you can grow into power as you get older. Now, another factor that's not considered on the SMV chart is the notion of geographic arbitrage. So my understanding is that the author of the SMV chart, Rollo Tomassi, has lived on East Coast metropolitan USA all of his life. He hasn't ventured beyond that country. Now, I've lived in about 12 foreign countries for over a year. I've travelled to between 80 and 100 foreign countries all over the world and spent extensive time there. And like I say, I've lived in about 10 to 12 foreign countries, mostly in Eastern and Central Europe. And you can get a bump in your SMV when you travel and live in foreign countries. Not just by virtue of coming from a country like the UK or USA, but things like that you actually just look different. You know, there is an element of girls wanting to mate with you, so to speak, not to put too fine a point on it, because you have big differences in genetics. It's genetic variation. Tend to be that if you mate with someone who is genetically very different to you, you're more likely to produce healthy, strong, intelligent, beautiful babies. Women are instinctively aware of this, so if you look different to the local men in the populace, so I look nothing like a Slav or a Polish guy, the skull shape is different, the eye colour is different, the shape of the face is different, the hair is different, the body shape is different, everything is different, even the IQ is probably different. So these are qualities that tend to attract women to you if you're different to them, and actually to a degree higher in SMV than them as well. So the SMV chart does not account for geographic arbitrage, and this is something that you can do probably more likely as you get older and you learn how to live outside the system, develop a side hustle, make money from a boring beta job, and learn how to live outside the system. This will be covered later on in this series. There will be related videos which I'll point out at the end, and I cover this in more depth in my book Primal, Seduction, and especially living outside the system in my book The Sigma Male. I'd just mention as well is that some countries I've actually been to, probably the Ukraine is the biggest one, but also Belarus, is that actually when you get older it's actually an advantage to be older. The girls of 20 prefer a man in his 40s and even 50s. When you get towards 60, who knows, I'm not anywhere near that, but when you get towards that age it might start to decline a bit, but you're not seeing the big decline in SMV in these countries, certainly not. In fact, it's an advantage to be older in your 40s versus a 20-year-old. And finally, we get to status. So the author himself does say on the SMV chart that a man that's got status doesn't decline as rapidly in SMV. Now think about that. There are ways of actually simulating status even if you don't have lots of money and you're a CEO, etc. So there's what I call hard and soft status. Now I go through this a lot in Primal, Seduction, and especially in the Sigma Male, but like I say, there are ways of simulating it. So what does that mean? It basically boils down to having a commanding presence. When you go out and about and you move through the world and a young girl is with you, if you've got commanding presence, then what you're doing is simulating a guy with status. So when I say presence, I mean like knowing how the world works, being in command of yourself, not being overawed by her, feeling entitled to her, having high self-esteem, being good socially. So when you go to a restaurant, you know how the restaurant works, you know how to deal with a waiter, you know how to be assertive. All of these are signs of high status. Again, you can simulate this. You don't actually need to have lots of money to simulate this and have this what I call soft status. And again, I go through all of this in great detail in Primal, Seduction and the Sigma Male. So that concludes this short presentation on the sexual market value chart. The next in the series is male sexual market value and the secrets explained, and it talks in more depth about the mindset qualities that I've just referenced here that can simulate status. So check that video out, it's flashing up on the screen now. I've also put it as a pinned comment so that you can find the next in the series, and it's also a card on the screen in the top right hand corner. Check out the video, and I hope this helps, and I'll speak to you soon.